Honestly, this feels like therapy just walking back through the experience. I have since moved in with my girlfriend in a house that feels quiet and calm. Sitting outside now, it's a lot easier to process through everything. After the experiences I had with seeing the girl, and then my mom tell me that she had heard the little girl running up and down the hallway, laughing and trying to get her attention, the house felt open to more activity. The summer in Denver is warmer than most people think, and this house had no air conditioning. Even with fans, it was easy to climb up to 80 inside with even the best fan setup. This was honestly my first step for my debunking. I thought I was having some type of fever or heat induced experience. I bought several swamp cooler style fans, and while I felt comfortable temp because it didn't help, my next thought was carbon monoxide and or black mold. I became obsessed with trying to find out why I was hearing, seeing, and feeling things, but nothing helped. The summer was a cluster of experiences. I honestly can't recall each one in order because it was easily weekly, sometimes almost a daily feeling. The main feeling was that I could only describe as a static energy. I tried to explain it to people like standing next to one of those electrical towers. It wasn't audible, but I could feel it walking in the hallway, in my bedroom, and the kitchen steps down to the basement. I will list off the things in the best order I can. The first one, the basement steps. They were old and creaky, and initially I would think it was the house settling, and to a degree that was the case. However, there were two very specific instances that was not the case. One night I was brushing my teeth and heard my cat's ping pong ball bouncing in the kitchen and down the steps. This happened 3 times. A steady bounce, bounce, bounce on the tile floors, and then hit off the wall leading down the steps, bounced down one stair, and hit the door to the backyard. After the third time, I called out to my cat to knock it off. I remembered so vividly sticking my head out the door and looking into the kitchen. And there was my cat, not in the kitchen but laying in my daughter's room, in a very cat pose of not giving a fuck. There was no way she could have made it over there and lounge in the time I heard the last ball bounce down. Number 2. I was working from home and had my computer set up in my dining room. Again in shotgun fashion, the house basically was a straight line from the back door to the front door. My desk was set up in a way that I could look out the front window of the living room to my back room. I was on a Teams call with an employee and heard footsteps running up and down the back stairs, to the point where I had to tell my employee to give me a second. I leaned back and told the cat to knock it off and looked back at the screen when my face went white and I did a double take down the stairs. When I had looked back at the screen, I had noticed my cat, again in a very casual pose, sitting on the couch in the main room. I had told my employees about it, and when this particular one experienced it with me, I felt really validated. The steps were clear. They were audible but quick and playful. If it wasn't a cat, it was something small and curious. And then listening. It's harder to describe this one, but I'll try. As more things happened, I started talking about it more, generally on the phone or on Teams call. If I was in my room, the hallway, or kitchen, and I started to talk about the little girl, I could feel her around me. I haven't seen my grandma in 3 years. My mom and I moved across the country after the divorce, and we didn't have the money for a plane ticket. At least, that's what my mom claims. I think it's just because she hates my grandma. Well, funny how her attitude magically changed when her boyfriend presented her with plane tickets to Costa Rica. Eva, your grandma's so much fun. She'll teach you how to knit. She'll teach you how to bake butterscotch cookies. She's the best. She did warn me about something, though. Her mind has gotten bad. My mom told me she has trouble remembering things, recognizing people. Is she gonna be okay? Yeah, but just be patient with her, okay? And if she seems really out of it, call Mrs. Dempsey down the street. I put her number in your phone, okay? But you are going to have a great time, my mom said, plastering on a smile. It's going to be wonderful. 2 days later, I was getting off at Pittsburgh Airport. Funny how my mom said I was too young to go to the dinner alone with Shireen. The world is dangerous for a 13-year-old girl, in her words. But she had no problem sending me off on a plane alone. My grandma wasn't great with cell phones. She didn't pick up when I called. But as soon as I got to the pickup line, I saw her silver Subaru out back at the curb. Grandma stood beside it, smiling widely. Grandma, I said, running up to her. She didn't open her arms to hug me. She just stood there, looking down at me. Grandma? Hello, dear, she said, after a pause, as if just noticing me for the first time now. How have you been? I'm so happy to see you. Then she opened the car door and gestured me inside. The car smelled like old person smell. I'm sorry that's mean, but it's true. I crinkled my nose as I pulled on my seatbelt, and she drove us back through the city, out into the Pennsylvanian countryside. Get comfortable, dear, Grandma said as she led me inside. The house looked the same as it always did, a little stale, a little outdated, but also oddly comforting compared to the minimalist style of my mom's house. I glanced at the needlepoint hanging in the foyer of a large pitcher of lemonade. Make yourself at home. You can eat anything you find in the fridge or the pantry, she told me. Oh, except I almost forgot to tell you that I do have one rule. The basement is off limits. Why? It's a little dangerous down there, dear. Wouldn't want you getting hurt. The basement had never been off limits before. It was finished on one side, and she had a bunch of board games and a sofa down there. I liked hanging out down there. It was the only place that didn't smell like old people. It wasn't dangerous before, I protested. Well, it is now, she said, in a significantly firmer tone. Then her smile went right back on, and she asked me, would you like some butterscotch cookies? Oh, yes, please. My mom was right. Grandma was kind of a fun. I helped her with the cookies, and she told me she'd send me home with a recipe. I did some reading and talked to my friend Shirin on the phone. Then it was bedtime. Tall and thin, Grandma looked like a ghost as she paced down the dark hallway to her bedroom. Night, night, she said, poking her head out and giving me a wave. Good night, Grandma. Her blue eyes glinted in the darkness. Then the door sneaked shut. I fell asleep quickly, despite the bed that was a little too soft and the loud cricket outside my window. I woke up with a start, however, and looked at my phone to see it was almost 2 a.m. My throat was parched, so I headed out to the hall bathroom to get some water. As I walked across the hallway, I noticed Grandma's bedroom door was open, and as I looked harder, what the hell? Grandma was sitting on her bed in her nightgown, staring out into the hallway, head tilted slightly, blue eyes glinting in the darkness. I stopped in my tracks. Grandma, was she smiling? Grandma, Eva, is that you? She called out. No, she wasn't smiling, at least not anymore. Yeah, it's me, I replied, my voice wavering. Why are you up? I thought I heard something, she replied. So I was just sitting here to make sure it was nothing. I got my water, feeling unsettled. When I got out of the bathroom, Grandma was poking her head out of the doorway again, and she was waving. Night, she said, it's good night. The next day, when I asked her about it, she didn't even seem to remember the interaction. I don't remember being up, she said, and looking at me. In the sunny light filtering through the window, she looked much less scary. White hair tied back with a silver beret, pale wrinkled skin, tried blue eyes, tired blue eyes. You saw me up? Yeah, I said firmly. Oh. Then she rose from the seat, still in her nightgown, and shuffled towards the stove. Would you like pancakes this morning, Ellison? My heart sank. Ellison was my mom's name. Eva, I corrected, following her into the kitchen. Right, of course, Eva. She shook her head. You were just a spitting image of her when she was your age. The dark eyebrows and the curly hair. She shook her head again. It's like going back in time. She made the pancakes in silence, the tines of the fork hitting the bowl, another egg gloping in. Cracked eggshells sat by the counter. A sharp sizzle as the visuous batter hit the cast iron pan. I have chocolate chips I can add, she said, riffling through the counter. Oh, wait, this expired a year ago. Well, it's fine, I told her. After the breakfast, I thought maybe we would play a game of Go Fish like old times, or take a walk, but Grandma had other plans. I'm afraid I'm feeling rather tired, she told me. Is it okay if I go rest, and you just hang out here? Well, that's fine, I brought my Switch. I told her it was just the video games. Okay, that's really nice. Well, get me if you need anything, okay? Yes, I noted. I found myself surprised that I was disappointed. I thought I didn't miss all those things we used to do. Boring things like playing cards or walking, but I did. Whatever, I'm here for a whole week, I told myself. Going up to my room, I booted up my Switch and started playing Pokemon. A few hours went by. When I got hungry, I went back down to the kitchen, but Grandma still wasn't around. I hope she's okay. And I thought that it's okay. I poked around the fridge and found some leftover chicken, dated 2 days ago. I popped it in the microwave and sat down to eat. I'd only been eating a few minutes when I heard it. A scuffing sound coming from the basement. I got off the couch and walked towards the basement door. She told me not to go down there. What was down there then? Rats? An illegal, exotic pet? Yeah, that's correct. The scuffing sounds continued. I pressed my ear to the door, and then I heard it. Help me, spoken in my grandma's voice. Every muscle in my body froze. She must have gotten trapped down there. Maybe she fell down the stairs, and that's why I haven't seen her for hours. I undid the deadbolt and swung the door open. Grandma, Grandma, I called. The lights were off, but from what little I could see, it didn't look like she was lying at the bottom of the stairs. Thank God. Grandma, I called again, louder this time. Help me. Hands grabbed me from behind and yanked me forcefully back. The door slammed in my face, and my grandma was in my face, her eyes wild. I told you not to go in the basement. She shrieked so loudly my ears rang. I heard you down there, I said. My voice was trembling. No, you didn't, she snapped back. Her face twisted in this awful, vicious expression of anger I would never seen before. I'm right here. I was upstairs lying down when I heard you calling for me. There is no one down there. But I heard you, I said, tears starting to sprinkle my eyes. She just shook her head and walked away. For the rest of the day, Grandma sat in the living room and she was knitting. Every time I passed by the basement door, her eyes followed me. I started to feel incredibly uncomfortable. When I went up to my bedroom to talk to Shirin, I could hear her footsteps outside my door. She was trying to be as quiet as possible. Her footsteps were slow and light, but I still heard them. When I came down for dinner, Grandma was all smiles. She served me a dish of warm lasagna, cheese melty and gooey on top, smelling of garlic and onion. Thanks, thanks, I said. It felt like she was trying to make amends for yelling at me. But when I sat down to eat it, she just stared at me. Aren't you going to have some? I asked, hovering the first bite next to my mouth. No, it doesn't fit my diet. This is just for you, Ellison, she replied. Eva, I snapped back. I set the fork down, this once feeling like all kinds of weird. I stared at my grandma's face, a chill going down my spine. Her blue eyes were so intense, was so cold. She seemed so different from 3 years ago. What kind of cake did you make me for my ninth birthday? I asked. She titled her head, staring intently. I don't remember, dear. You spent all day on that cake. Of course you remember. Her mouth became a thin line. She paused. But I don't remember. What's my birthday then? I pressed. She blinked. It's October, I guess, isn't it? Well, no, it's September 14. You almost forgot all the matters. I'm sorry, dear, she finally said, breaking eye contact. I don't remember things as well as I used to, and I mix up names and words. It's not because I don't love you. I stared at her and then I forced a fake smile. I know, Grandma, you love me. Then I got up from the table and started up the stairs. You haven't finished your lasagna, dear. Grandma's voice came from the bottom of the stairs. I'm not hungry, I called back. I hadn't taken a single bite. I think my grandma's skinwalker, I whispered into the phone. Shireen grasped on the other hand. What? She doesn't remember anything about me. I think she's keeping my real grandma locked away down in the basement. I heard her voice, calling for help. A heavy sigh. Shireen was not the superstitious type. Are you sure you heard her voice from the basement? Yes, I'm absolutely sure. I'm going to go down there, and I replied. And it will be tonight. Maybe you should just wait for your mom to get back. My grandma could be dead by then. Maybe you should call the police. What if my grandma tells them I'm a liar, that I made it all up? Are they going to believe her? Or a 13-year-old girl? I still think you shouldn't go down there. But I'm gonna. Okay, well, give me your address or something. If you don't call me back, I will call the police. Well, that's a good idea. I gave her my address. She tried to talk me out of it for another 10 minutes, and then I hung up. Then I swung the door open and crept out into the hallway. Silence, darkness under Grandma's door. But I was safe. I tiptoed down the stairs and walked over to the basement door. Then I waited for a few minutes to make sure that Grandma wasn't following me. It was silence. I slowly, quietly slid the deadbolt. Then I swung the door open, cracking slightly on its hinges. I winced, hoping that didn't wake her up. No more scuffing sounds, no voice calling for help. Maybe she's already. I swallowed the thought and started down the stairs. The light didn't seem to work, but I had my phone with me. The flashlight illuminated each step beneath me. I slowly made my way down. When my feet hit the cold, concrete bottom, I swung the light around. All the blood drained out of my face. Sitting on the floor, chained to a support pole, was my grandma. Her head hung limply in front of her, white curls hanging over her face. Grandma, I called, my throat tightening. I hope she isn't already. And Grandma lifted her head. The phone fell out of my hands. Her face, there was something horribly wrong with her face. Pure white eyes, a wide smile full of pointed teeth, skin that seemed to slough off her face in patches, revealing bone beneath. No, no, no. A horrible cracking sound filled the air. I watched in horror as the thing transformed. Bones twisted and contorted. The face opened its mouth in a silent scream, and then I was staring at myself, chained to the post, white eyes fading to match my brown ones. It cocked its head. Hello, it said in a voice that matched my own. I let out on a scream, and then Grandma, my real grandma, from upstairs, not this horrible thing, was grabbing me and shoving me up the stairs. The door slammed shut, and I found myself on the floor, panting, looking up at her. What did I tell you? Don't go in the basement. What, Grandma? I chucked out. She double checked the door was locked and then led me to the kitchen. That thing showed up a year ago, she told me, as she pulled out my leftover, now congelated, piece of lasagna from the fridge. She wrapped a thin blanket over my shoulders and sat down across from me. At first, it took the appearance of an old friend of mine. I let it in, I fed it. Just food, she said, glancing down at the lasagna in front of me. It's still uneaten. It started eating my memories, but I don't know how. But I found myself forgetting simple things, names, dates, birthdays. And then one day I wake up to the thing, looking just like me. I don't think it was aware that I would not respond well to a person looking exactly like me. I tricked it into the basement by pretending to relive of a memory of the basement being a very important place over and over again. It eventually ate that memory and went down there. I locked it in with the help of someone I met online. Someone who believed me. I was able to chain it to the post. I'm keeping it there so it can't hurt anyone else. I stared at her. If you knew you had this dangerous thing in your basement, why did you let me stay here? I missed you, and I foolishly thought you would listen to me. Scuffing sounds came from beneath us, and then I heard my own voice, reverberating through the floor. Help me. Get back down here and help me. Will it eat my memories too? I whispered. No, it needs physical contact for that. Our talk was interrupted by three short knocks on the door, and that's when I realized I never called Shreen back, and couldn't because my phone was at the bottom of the basement stairs, down there with it. Oh, I will take care of this, I told her, getting up from the kitchen table. Thankfully, the police brought my tail, and because I didn't let them in, didn't hear the clone of me screaming in the basement. Then I used Grandma's old computer to send an email to Shireen. There is still the matter of the thing in the basement, of course. But that's another problem for another day. For now, I'm going to eat some lasagna and then go straight to the bed. And Mom was right. My grandma is so funny. Something walks whistling past my house every night at 3:03. Every night, no matter the weather, something walks down our street whistling softly. You can only hear it if you are in the living room or the kitchen when they walk by, and it always starts at exactly 3:03 a.m. The sound starts faint, somewhere near the beginning of the lane near the Carson place. We're towards the middle of the street, so the whistling moves past us before fading away in the direction of the cold day sack. When I was younger, my sister and I would sneak into the kitchen some nights to listen. Mom and Dad didn't like that, and we'd catch hell if they found us out there. But they were never too hard on us since we always stuck to the one big rule, and that was, don't try to look at whatever was whistling. My neighborhood is a funny place. I have lived here since I was 6 and I really loved it. The houses are small but well kept, good-sized yards, plenty of places to roam. There are a lot of other kids here my age. I turned 13 back in October. We grew up together and would always play four score in the cool day sack or roam around from back porch to back porch in the summer. This was a good place to grow up. I'm old enough to see it. And there's only the two strange things here. The first one, the night whistling, and the other one, the good luck. The whistling never bothered me much. Like as I said, I couldn't even hear it from my bedroom. But Mom and Dad don't like talking about it. So I have stopped asking questions. My dad is a strong guy, tall and calm. He has an accent since he moved to the US as a kid. His family, my grandparents, they all are from the islands. That's what they call it. My dad, the only time he isn't so calm is if the whistler comes up. He talks a little quicker then. Eyes moves faster. He tells us not to think about it so much and to always remember the one rule. The big rule. Don't try to look outside when the whistler goes past. Well, not that we could look even if we wanted. See, there are shutters on the inside of every window. Big pieces of heavy canvas that pull down from the top and last to the bottom of the window frame. Each last even has a small lock about the size of what you would find on a diary. My dad locks those shutters every night before we all go to bed and keeps the key in his room. My mom, I don't know what she thinks about the whistling. I have seen her out in the living room before at 3:3 when the sound starts. I could see her if I cracked my door open just an inch to peek. She's not out there often, at least I haven't caught her much. But once or twice a month, I think she sits out there on our big red couch, just listening the matter. The whistler has the same tune every night. It's really cheerful. Da 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 dum. Da 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 dum. Remember how I said there are two odd things about where I live? Well, besides our night whistler, everyone in my neighborhood is really lucky. It's really hard to explain, and Dad doesn't like us talking about this part as much as he can either, but good things just seem to happen to people around here a lot. Usually it's the small things, winning a radio contest or getting an unexpected promotion at work, or finding some arrowheads buried in the yard. You know, the authentic kind. The weather is pretty good and there is no crime and everybody's gardens bloom extra bright in the fall. A million little blessings. I have heard my mom say about living here. But the main reason we stay here, why we moved here in the first place, is my sister Nola. She was born very sick, something with her lungs. We couldn't even bring her home when she was born, only visit her in the hospital. She was so small, I remember still, small even compared to the other babies. A machine had to breathe for her. We moved into our house here to be closer to the hospital. As soon as we moved here, Nola started getting better. The doctors couldn't figure it out. They chalked it up to whatever they were doing, but we all could tell they were confused. But my parents knew, even I knew, Nola getting better was just another of the million little blessings we got for living in our neighborhood. So that's why we stayed even after we found out that for every small miracle that happens here every day. So now and then, some bad things happen. But they only happen if you look for the whistler. See, our neighborhood has a welcoming committee. They show up with macaroni casserole and a gift basket and a manila folder whenever someone new moves in. They're very friendly. 4 people showed up when we moved in 7 years ago. The committee made a small talk, gave me a Snickers bar and took turns holding Nola. It was her first week out of the hospital, so they were extra careful. Then the committee asked to speak to my parents in private. So I was sent to my room where I still managed to hear nearly every word. The welcoming committee told my parents about how nice the neighborhood was. Really exceptionally hard to explain kind of nice. And then they told my parents about the even harder to explain whistling that happened every morning at 3:03 a.m. and ended at the tick of 3:05. The group, our new neighbors, warned my parents that the whistling was quiet. It would never harm or hurt us, as long as we didn't look for what was making the sound. This part they stressed, and I pushed my ear into the door, straining to hear them. People who went looking for the whistler had their luck change. Sometimes, tragically, a black cloud would hang over anyone that looked. Anything that could go wrong. The manila envelope the committee brought over contained newspapers clippings, the stories about car crashes and ruined lives, public deaths, and freak accidents. Not everyone dies, I heard the head of the committee tell my dad. But the life goes out of him, even if they're alive. There is no light in them ever again, and there is no presence. My mom, I could tell she wasn't taking it seriously. She kept asking if this was some prank they play on new neighbors. At one point, my mom got angry, accused the committee of trying to scare us out of our new home, asked them if they were racist on account of my dad being from the islands. My dad calmed her down, told her he could tell our new neighbors were sincere and they were just trying to help us. He explained that he grew up hearing this kind of stories from his mom and that he knew there were strange things that walked among us. Some of those strange things were good and some were bad, but most were just different. After the committee left, Dad went out to the hardware store, brought the canvas blinds and the latches and the locks and installed them on every window in the house after dinner. That first night in our new house, I crept out of my room at 3 a.m., only to find my dad awake sitting on the living room couch, holding my baby sister. My dad held up his finger in a she motion, but patted the couch next to him. I sat and we waited. At exactly 3 a.m. we heard the whistling. Da-da-da-da-dum, da-da-da-da-dum. It came and it went just like our neighbor said. The whistling returns each night and we never look and we enjoy our million little blessings every day. Nola breathes on her own and she's grown into a strong, clever girl. My dad even joined the welcoming committee. We don't get new neighbors often. Why would anyone want to leave? But when a new family moves in, my dad and the committee bring them macaroni casserole, a gift basket, and a manila folder. I can always tell by the look on my dad's face when he comes back. Not long ago, a family moved in directly next to us. The previous owner, Miss Maddie, passed away at age 105. She lived a good long life. Our new neighbors seemed like they would fit in for just fine. They believed the welcoming committee took my dad's advice about the locking shutters since they had a young child of their own. Whatever newspaper clippings were in that manila envelope, whatever evidence, my dad never let us see. But I imagine it must have been awfully convincing since our neighbors got along with no issues for the first month. One night, when our new neighbors had to leave town, they sent their son Holding to stay with us. He was 12, a year under me in school. I didn't know him well before that night, but as soon as his parents dropped him off after dinner, I could tell it was going to be a bad time. Do you know who is always out there whistling every night? Holden asked the moment the adults left the room. The three of us were sitting in the den, some Disney movie playing idly on the television. My sister and I exchanged a glance. We don't talk about that. And I said, I think it's that weirdo that lives in the big yellow house on the corner. Holden said. Mr. Tolls, my sister asked. No way, he's really, really nice. Holden shrugged. Must be a psycho killer. Noah tensed. We don't talk about it, I repeated. Let's go in my room and play Nintendo. We spent the next few hours playing games, eating popcorn, and then watching movies. A typical sleepover, but I could see Holden was getting antsy. After my parents had wished us a good night, locked the blinds, and gone to bed, Holden stood up from his beanbag and walked over to where Nola and I were sitting on my bed. Have you ever even tried looking? He asked. It's nearly time. Like most sleepovers, we'd conveniently ignored any suggestion of a bedtime. I was shocked to see he was right. It was almost 3 a.m. See, I can't even try to look because my dad locks the blinds every night and hides the key, he continued. And it was ignoring me. So does our dad, said Nola. No, replied Holden. No, he doesn't. You saw him do it, I said, a little sharper than I meant to sound. Holden grinned. Your dad locks the blinds, yeah. But he doesn't hide the key. He keeps it right on his normal key chain. So I asked, worried I already knew what he would say next. Because I had noticed that my dad didn't bother hiding the key anymore after all of these years. Because he knew we took it seriously. So after your dad locked up, but before your parents went to bed, I went to the bathroom, and on my way I may have peeked into their room, and I may have seen your dad's keychain on his nightstand, and I maybe went and borrowed the key to blinds. Nola and I stared, and his grin only grew wider. You are lying, I said. Holden shrugged. You can check if you want. Just open your parents' door and look. You'll see his keychain right there on the nightstand. I said, stay here, I told both of them. Don't move a muscle. I hurried over to my parents' room, but hesitated at the door. If Holden wasn't lying, my dad would be angry. Kept thinking about it, but more scared of an open window. With the whistler right outside, I opened the door, barely an inch, and looked it, but it was too dark to see. Taking a deep breath, I walked into the room. 2 steps into the dark, I froze. The whistling started, and I could hear it clearly from my parents' room. I never realized, but they must have heard the sound every night since we moved into the house. They never told us about this matter. I don't think I could have slept through it. I stood there, listening to the whistling come closer, unsure whether I should turn on a light or call out for my dad. Soft sounds from the living room brought me back to reality. Nola, I yelled, running out of my parents' room. Holden and Nola were standing near the front door next to a window. Holden wasn't lying. I could see him fumbling with the lock on one of the blinds. I heard a click. He did have the key. Holden let out a quick laugh. Nola stood next to him, hunched up, afraid but maybe curious. The whistling was right outside our house now. I think I made a sound, and I called it, but I can't remember. Time felt frozen, clock hands nailed to the face. But I found myself moving. I'm not fast. I have never been athletic. Somehow, though, I covered the space between myself and Nola in a moment. My eyes were locked on her, but I heard Holden pull the blind all the way down so it could release. I heard the snap of it start to raise, and I heard the whistling just on the other side of the window. But I had my arms around Nola and I turned her so she was facing away from the window. At the same time, I jammed my eyes shut. The blind whipped open. The whistling stopped. I felt Nola shaking in my arms. Don't look, okay? I told her. Don't turn around. We were positioned so that she was facing back towards the hallway, and I was facing the window at a time. My eyes were still closed. I felt her nod into my shoulder. I reached out with the arm not holding Nola and tried to touch Holden. My hand brushed against his arm. He was shaking worse than Nola. And there was silence. I reached past him and gingerly felt for the window. Eyes still shut. The glass was cold against my fingertips, colder than it should have been for the time of year. I moved my hand up the window, searching for the string to the blind. The glass began to get warmer. The further I reached, and there was a gentle hum fitting back into my fingertips. I tried not to think about what might be on the other side of the window. Finally, I touched the string and yanked the blind shut. I opened my eyes in the dim light, looking out from the kitchen. I could make out Holden, pale and small, staring at me now closed window. Holden? I asked again. He turned towards me and he screamed. Everything became a flurry of motion. Lights sparked to life in the hall, then the living room. My parents' footsteps thundered across the hardwood floor. I didn't turn to look back at them. My eyes were glued to Holden. He was pale, had bit his lips so hard there was a thin red line of blood running down his chin, and he would wet himself. What happened, man? My dad asked from behind me. I managed to swivel away from Holden and looked back. I have never seen my dad scared before, but I saw it that night. In that moment, an old, ugly terror stitched on his face. A parent's fear. Yes, Holden, he mouthed to me. I nodded yes. My dad let out a breath. He looked so relieved, and I nearly expected him to cheer. But then he turned to Holden, and my dad's face changed. I wondered if he felt bad for feeling good, that Holden was the only one that looked. There was a knock at the door. We all froze. Holden whimpered. "Don't answer it," my mom said. She stood at the threshold of the hall. I would always thought she was a skeptic and just humoured my dad about the windows and the whistler, but that night we were all believers. I noticed that both of my parents held baseball bats they must have taken from their bedroom. The knock came again, a little louder this time. "Please don't open the door," Holden whispered. My dad walked over to him, hugged him close. "We won't," my dad promised, still holding his bat. "Nothing is coming in here tonight." This time the knocking was loud enough to rattle the door. Holden screamed again, and Nola clutched her arms around my neck. My mom came over and knelt down next to us, wrapping my sister and me close. "Tut, tut, tut. Call the police," my mom whispered to my dad. The knocking instantly stopped. My dad looked over his shoulder at us. Do you think he was cut off by a frantic knocking that trailed off to a polite tap, tap, tap? "Police," something said from the other side of the door. The voice from outside sounded exactly like my mom, like a parrot repeating the words back to her. "Police. Call. The police. Tap, tap, tap. It's police." My mom pulled us closer. "Stop," I heard her whisper. "I don't think calling them will help," my dad said. "How will we know when they are the ones at the door?" The knocking came back harder than before. The door shook. Then it stopped. After a long moment, I heard the knocking again, but it was coming from our back door. We all turned together toward the back door, but the knocking immediately returned to the front door. Front to back, back to front, loud then quiet, then loud again. Suddenly, the sound was coming from both doors at once, big, heavy blows like a sledgehammer. Then something started rapping against all of the windows in the house. Then the walls. It was like we were living inside a drum with a dozen people trying to play at once. Or we were a turtle and something was attempting to claw us out of our shell. "Stop," Holden yelled. The knocking died. "I won't tell," Holden said, staring at the door. "I promise I won't tell anyone what I saw. Just please go away." We waited for nearly a minute. Then we heard it, a soft tap, tap, tap coming from the window. And Holden had looked through earlier. Holden started to cry, sobbing like a prisoner watching gallows being built outside their cell. My dad held him, brushed his hair, but never lied to him, never told him things would be okay. The tapping at the window went on for the rest of the night. We huddled together in the living room, but I don't know how long it would last. Eventually, my mom tried to take us into the room while my dad stayed to watch the door. But the second we moved into the bedroom, the knocking came back, so loud it was possible to ignore. I was afraid the door couldn't take it. We went back to the living room and the knocking stopped. Only the tap, tap, tap on the window remained. None of us slept that night. The tapping stopped around 7 a.m. That's about the time the sun comes out here. We waited another 2 hours before my dad opened the blinds from one window. He made us all go back to my parents' bedroom first. I heard him open the door, then come back in. Holden's parents came back around lunchtime. My mom and dad walked Holden over to his house, and they all went inside for quite a while. Nola and I watched from the window. She has stuck to me to the whole day, right at my side, sometimes holding my hand. When my parents came back, they looked grim but wouldn't tell us what they said to Holden's family. It was a Sunday, so we all spent the day together, ordered pizza and watched movies. That night, everyone slept in my room, Nola and my mom in the bed with me, my dad in a chair he would pulled over. There was no knocking that night or any night since. We didn't see much of Holden or his parents for the rest of that week. But by Thursday, there was a moving truck in their driveway. Nola and I watched them packing up the whole afternoon after school. What sticks with me most is how tired Holden and his parents looked. All three had the same pallor, grim mouths, and lightless eyes. Even from across the street, I could tell something was very wrong. Holden and his family were gone before sunset. I remember what the original welcoming committee you said to my parents when we moved in. Not everyone who looks at the Whistler dies, but even those that live have the light go out of them, and the rest of their lives are full of misfortune. A million little tragedies. I think Holden's parents must have looked, either to comfort him if they didn't believe or shared the burden if they did. I watch Nola some days, happy and young and alive, and I wonder if I would been slower, if she would looked out for the window that night. Then what would I have looked to? To comfort her? To share the burden? I'm glad I don't have to find out. We still live in that house, in that neighborhood. We still hear our whistler walking past every night. The blessings, the luck, the good things here are too good to leave. But we are careful. We don't have friends over to spend the night anymore. And my dad hides the key to the blinds very, very well. Not that I have gone looking. Some things you just don't need to look for.